Imagine the scene, a beautiful sunny Saturday, that kind that looks like a movie, when everything is finally fitting. The clothes are extended in the clothesline, the washed dishes shine on the shelf and, for the first time in weeks, you breathe relieved, thinking that domestic chaos gave a respite. It was right now that my daughter Lisa, with her 6 years of pure joy, came running to me, her eyes shining like stars, the trembling voice of emotion. "Mom, look what I got." She was pulling my arm tightly, as if he wanted to drag me to see the greatest treasure in the world. And it was really. There he was, gleaming under the sun, with his vibrant colors and details that made any child sigh, the new vehicle of 2 pedals he had dreamed so much, parked proudly in front of our house on the outskirts of Moscow. But, as they say, full happiness is an invitation for bad luck to knock on the door. And he not only hit it, he went with everything, accompanied by my mother and my youngest sister, Alyona, the one who, since childhood, turned any family reunion into a minefield. Next to them, the Milona niece, daughter of Alyona, coetánea de Lisa. What would be an ordinary day of visits turned, in a matter of minutes, a nightmare like the worst screenwriter would dare to write. Lisa, without realizing the approaching storm, ran to receive them with enthusiasm that only one child is able to have. "Grandma, Aunt Alyona, Milona, come see my gift," he shouted, pulling each one by the arm as if to share a magical secret. And then I saw her. The expression on Alyona's face. It was not envy, not anger, it was worse, a cold smile, so forced that it seemed about to crack. The stretched lips, the jaws contracted, the fixed eyes on the bicycle as if it were a personal offense. I know that look since I understand myself. It is the same who preceded each of his tantrums in childhood, every crisis of fury that mysteriously always ended with me being guilty. Lisa, oblivious to danger, continued to chatter, showing every detail with the pride of those who display a work of art. "Look at the ribbons in the handlebars. Look how the ink shines in the sun." That's when Alyona, with a terrifying calm, let out, "Now I'm going to show what I think of that." Before my brain processed those words, she had already turned, entered the shed and turned with a hammer in her hand. A hammer. Have you ever felt that cold in your pimple when reality seems to distort yourself? When your instinct screams that something is wrong, but your body refuses to react? That's exactly that. The first blow echoed like a shot. The metal moaned, the structure folded. Lisa brought her hands to her mouth, wide eyes, the pale face with shock. The second blow was even more brutal. The ink cracked, the front wheel twisted like a broken member. In the third, the handlebar broke, and the colorful ribbons fell inert, like dead leaves. And then, with a tranquility that froze my blood, Alyona crouched down, looked into my 6-year-old daughter's eyes and said that it serves as a lesson. Lesson. As if destroying the innocence of a child was a pedagogical act. How to teach that joy can be crushed in a matter of seconds was something noble. Lisa didn't cry. Not immediately. She just stood, shaking, her trembling lips, her shoulders shaken by silent sobs. And me. I felt a wave of ice invade me, a numbness that paralyzed each muscle. It was not anger. Not yet. It was something deeper, the certainty that once again I was reliving a script that I knew too well. That's when my mother, instead of embracing her granddaughter or scolding her daughter who had just committed an act of pure cruelty, decided to make her contribution. With his hands on his hips and a tone of those who hold the absolute truth, she sentenced, "It shouldn't have bought something so expensive for her." That is, the problem was not the violence. The free we just witnessed. No. The problem was me. I, who dared to give my daughter a gift she deserved. I, who had always been the villain of this story. But I didn't shouted. I didn't rage, I didn't scratch the hammer from the hands of Alyona, I didn't go down in tears. No. I just remained motionless, with a smile on my lips, because sometimes the silence is the sharper weapon there is. Alyona threw the hammer on the floor with a crash, satisfied with herself, as if a battle had just won. My mother nodded, as if that were a great demonstration of justice. And that's when I let go of a single sentence. Such a simple phrase, so precise, that both were paralyzed, as if they had punched their stomach. You may be wondering, what did I say? Patience. I'll get there. But first, I need you to understand that this moment was not an isolated incident. It was the apex of a story that has been repeated for decades. Aliona, my younger sister, just 2 years separate us, was born screaming, and from what I remember, never stopped. The difference is that while other children are taught to control their emotions, she was treated as a princess whose minor discomfort was a reason to punish others. And guess who always paid the bill? I remember as if it were today, every tantrum, every access of fury, every broken object became a moral class for me. Katia, why didn't you give the toy to your sister? When I just didn't want to share. You should have let her win, when she lost a game. Why did you tease her? When she broke something out of pure stubbornness. At the age of 10, I was already a specialist in absorbing alien guilt. My mother's favorite phrase? Don't leave your sister sad. Ironic, considering that Aliona was annoyed with her own shadow. Once, I saved my allowance money for months to buy a pendant necklace for her, nothing extravagant, but cute. When she opened the box and saw that the pendant was blue instead of pink, she had an attack as if I had given her a poisoned gift. Tore the chain in half and threw it to the floor. And who did my mother blame? To me. Do you know she wanted pink? Why did you buy blue? This was my childhood, Aliona destroyed, and I was responsible. Years have passed, and do you think something has changed? It is wrong. I graduated in law, worked until late at night, built a solid career, and today I earn more than anyone in my family. It could have turned my back, but no. I always extended my hand. I paid Mo, bought medicines, guaranteed that no one was needed. And what was the result? Ingratitude disguised as law. Each time I refused to play a whim, a new cell phone, a trip, an expensive gift, I turned the villain. Selfish. Petty. As if my money were an obligation, not a gesture of goodwill. So when I say that the bicycle episode didn't come out of nowhere, you understand what I'm talking about. It all started a few weeks earlier, when Lisa and Milona played in the backyard. The bike of Milona, already old and combed, broke. Not because of Lisa's fault, who, at age 6, could barely hold a screwdriver, but because time and use had left it on the edge of the collapse. Aliona, of course, didn't see it that way. As soon as he saw the toy on the floor, he pointed to my daughter and shouted, "She broke." My mother, faithful to the script, echoed, "Take responsibility, Katia. Lisa needs to learn what actions have consequences." And that's when I realized, nothing had changed. I was still the same 10-year-old girl, being guilty of the mistakes of others. But this time, it wasn't a cheap toy or a child game. This time, it was my daughter's happiness. And that's when I smiled. And I said. And they understood, for the first time in their lives, that the game was over. But not before throwing one last look at me, that same look. That, for years, made me doubt my own memory, my sanity, my ability to distinguish justice from cruelty. This time, however, he ricocheted. I didn't find in it power, only the echo of a woman who discovered too late that her weapons no longer work. The fence's door range when closing behind them. The sound echoed as an end point. Lisa was still holding my hand, her small fingers pressing mine with a force that didn't match her sizes. I crouched down to the level of his eyes, where tears still shone, stuck, like dewdrops in a spiderweb. "They won't hurt you anymore," I said, passing her thumb down her cheek. "Not even your two-wheeled vehicle." She nodded seriously, as if she already knew that some promises don't need oaths to be true. Then, with the cruel wisdom of the children, he asked, "Aunt Aliona, won't you get a punishment?" I looked at the twisted piece of metal on the floor, to the sauce marks on the grass where the vehicle had fallen. The punishment was already served. He had a name, Consequence. And for the first time, it was not me who would carry him on the back. "She already received it," I said. "Just don't know yet." Dierma approached, placing her hand on my shoulder with that gesture that always calmed me, as if her touch could reorder the chaos. He said nothing. I didn't need to. His silence was a shield, and I leaned against him, only for a second, before I got up. "Let's get Milona's new vehicle," I said, extending his hand to Lisa. "And this time, no one will spoil the surprise." She smiled. A shy but genuine smile, like the first ray of sunshine after a storm that lasted decades. And when we started walking toward the car, with Dirma beside us and the weight of a life of blame finally detaching from my shoulders, I knew one thing. It wasn't just seeing UCI Peddy that was being changed. It was the script. And this time, I had written the end. What something inside me, something I didn't even know was broken, began to recompose. It was not relief. It was not triumph. It was a strange stillness, like the calm that comes after you finally stop holding your breath. That kind of silence that is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something new. Something that did not fit in the ready-made phrases of my family. In yours, what will you think? Or family is sacred. It was the feeling that, for the first time, the floor under my feet was not made of moldy sand, but something solid. Maybe even concrete. Lisa entered the kitchen with her fingers still dirty chocolate and a spot of ice cream on her chin. He looked at me with those eyes that, despite everything, still believed that the world could be fair. Did Grandma call you? He asked, as if he already knew the answer. He called. She bit her lip, the way she did when she tried to decide if she should say anything. Is she angry? I crouched again, to be at the same level. Not to explain, not to comfort, just so she knew she wasn't alone in that. She's afraid, Lizoka. Fear that people will see what she did. And do you know what is funny? Lisa shook her head, the brown curls jumping. Fear is the only thing they understand. Dirma appeared at the door, his cell phone in his hand and an expression that I couldn't decipher. Andre called me too, he said softly. He apologized. By the Milana. I didn't expect it. Not from his part, not after years of crooked glances and passive anti-comments at family meetings. But there was, the first crack on the wall they had built around themselves. And the Milana? I asked, because that's what everything was all about, after all. Not in fights, not in the injured pride, but in that girl who had lost the new vehicle even before she even learned to pedal in her. Dirma smiled a small smile, almost acceptable, but carried the weight of a decision. She will have another. Better. And this time, no one will need to hide the garage key. Lisa squeezed my hand, the small, sticky fingers with ice cream. Can we invite Milana to ride a bicycle with us? When does she have the new one? I pulled her close, smelling strawberry shampoo in her hair. He can. And we buy a very loud bell, for everyone to hear when it passes. Because that was, deep down, it was not about winning or losing, of proving who was right. It was a matter of ensuring that the next time a child smiled by earning something, no one was there with a hammer in his hand, literal or metaphorical. And if that meant I had to be the villain of their history, what was? Villains, after all, are the only ones that change the end. The phone vibrated again at the table. This time, it was a bank notification. Transfer received, Andre S. There was no message, no explanation. Just a value that covered exactly the cost of a new vehicle, with exchange for a helmet and knee pads. Dirma raised her eyebrows. I think someone has just chosen one side, he said. I looked at Lisa, who was already running to the room, probably to make a list of all the stickers that the new Milana bike should have. No, I said, finally smiling. I think someone has just realized which side has always been. It was a relief, because it meant that someone else had finally seen and said, this is not normal. Elena and my mother's calls continued to fall as hail, but the tone has changed. Less moralism, more despair. I shouldn't have posted this. You're destroying your family. Think of your niece, as if I hadn't thought of it all this time. I stopped answering. That night, instead, I sat on the edge of Lisa's bed, watching his quiet sleep, and allowed me to feel something I hadn't felt for years. It was not anger. It was not exhaustion. It was clarity. Because there was one thing they would never understand: family is not an acquired right. One cannot demolish, lie, demand and yet expect unconditional loyalty. Family should mean protection, security, love. And if none of this exists, perhaps family is just another word that hides those who are afraid of the consequences. In the end, I drew a line. Perhaps for some it was too abrupt. For others, insufficient. And you? What do you think?